Welcome to today's explainer, where we're going to transform your tangled web routing into a clean, modular, and highly maintainable architecture. If you've been building applications in Laravel, you already know that routing is basically the bridge connecting the outside world to your source code. But let's be honest, as your project grows, that bridge can get pretty messy, like spaghetti code messy. Today, we're absolutely going to fix that.
All right, let's just quickly run through the agenda for our refactoring journey today. We'll be covering 1. The spaghetti route problem. 2. Grouping and naming routes. 3. Embracing resource controllers. 4. The power of invocables. And finally, 5. Splitting your route files.
Starting off with Section 1, the spaghetti route problem. We really have to start by diagnosing this core issue that hits, honestly, every single growing Laravel application as it scales up. It's a phase every developer goes through. If you're constantly getting lost trying to find a single route declaration, it's a massive red flag that your code needs a serious structural cleanup. Think of your routes file as a map. When you open it, it should give you a crystal clear picture of what the application actually does. But when that file balloons to hundreds or literally thousands of lines, and you're just endlessly scrolling to find one simple GET request, that map has officially turned into a maze.
Now, hold on a second. As we fix this, we absolutely must avoid swinging to the opposite extreme, which is playfully known as ravioli code. We want readable code, not a bunch of over-engineered noise. Basically, extracting everything into dozens of tiny files just for the sake of it, well, that just adds ceremony without any real clarity. For example, if you're a solo dev building a simple 5-route CRUD app, you definitely don't need dedicated form requests and actions for every single endpoint. A controller with 5 lines of validation is perfectly fine. The goal of this explainer isn't to wrap everything in endless layers of abstraction. It's just to organize things logically.
Moving right along to Section 2, grouping and naming routes.
Let's tackle the low-hanging fruit first, because these are foundational habits that literally pay off immediately. Joel Clermont hit the nail on the head here. He says to do future developers a favor and always use named routes. This is absolutely essential for confident refactoring, mainly because, you might just be that future developer trying to understand it 6 months from now. When you jump into a new project and look at a controller that redirects somewhere, you want to be able to just click through your IDE and see exactly where it's going. If that route is just defined as a plain hard-coded string, you lose that superpower completely. Seriously, think about how often you see a path built up with clunky string concatenation, where parts of a URL are just joined together with variables literally shoved in the middle. It's a nightmare. It makes finding that route with a global find and replace almost impossible, which inevitably leads to broken code. But by moving to cleanly named routes and utilizing Laravel's built-in blade helpers, your code instantly becomes incredibly robust and future-proof.
And you know what's incredibly satisfying? Grouping. Using the controller and group methods immediately strips away all that repetitive boilerplate text you're so used to typing. If you've got a set of routes that all share the same prefix, require the exact same authentication middleware, and point to the same controller class, you do not need to write that out on every single line. Wrapping them in a controller group cleans up the visual noise instantly. It lets you clearly see just the endpoints and the specific methods they call. It's a total game changer.
Let's keep the momentum going with Section 3, Embrace Resource Controllers.
This is where we dive into how all this builds into the CRUD by design philosophy. By strictly sticking to these 7 standard CRUD operations, index, create, store, show, edit, update, and destroy, your controllers become perfectly predictable to anyone else reading your code base. This concept is hugely championed in the Laravel community. If you have a typical set of actions around a single model, like maybe a property or a user, you should absolutely leverage a resource controller. The beauty here is predictability. Whenever another dev opens that controller, they know exactly what the index or store method does without having to decipher any weird custom method names. And the real kicker, you can completely replace 7 messy lines of manual routing with just 1 elegant line of Laravel magic. Just by declaring a resource route, Laravel automatically generates the routes for all those standard actions, and it automatically assigns the proper RESTful HTTP verbs to them. Get, post, put, delete, the whole shebang. It even assigns the standard route names for you under the hood. How cool is that?
But wait, what if you're building an API? Well, utilizing the API resource method automatically trims things down to just the 5 essential endpoints. Because think about it, an API doesn't need to serve a visual HTML page for creating or editing data, right? It just accepts raw data payloads.
The amazing part is that you can actually reuse the exact same business logic classes across your web and API controllers. The only thing that changes is the response format and using the API resource method instead of the standard resource method in your routes file.
Okay, let's pivot to section 4, the power of invocables.
Because let's be real, what happens when standard CRUD just doesn't fit the specific action you're trying to build? Sometimes you have an isolated action that completely defies those standard 7 methods. Well, instead of cramming random methods into an existing controller, you can use the invoke.php magic method to build focused single-action invocable controllers. Let's say you have an order controller. If you need to add functionality to cancel an order, don't just tack a random cancel method onto the bottom of a massive controller file. Instead, create a dedicated cancel order controller with a single invoke method. Now, instead of a bloated controller that handles archiving, exporting, duplicating, and restoring, you get a highly focused, easily testable class that does one thing and does it perfectly. It adheres beautifully to the single responsibility principle.
And you can take this even further. Combine these single action controllers with scoped bindings to let Laravel automatically handle 404 errors without you having to write any custom manual checks. By combining custom keys with scoped binding, Laravel will automatically query the database to ensure, for example, that a post matching a specific slug actually belongs to the user defined in the URL. If either condition fails, boom, it throws a 404. No manual querying or error handling required in your controller at all. The route definition does all the heavy lifting for you. You can even apply these scoped bindings to entire groups at once. If you want scope binding on every route in a nested group, you just apply the scope bindings method directly to the overarching group definition. This prevents you from having to repeat that exact same logic on every single nested route, keeping your routing file beautifully clean and incredibly safe. Finally, we arrive at section 5, splitting your route files. For massive enterprise applications, even perfect grouping isn't enough. When you hit hundreds of routes, you have to break things apart. By systematically moving domain-specific routes into their own dedicated files, you completely eliminate that endless scrolling problem once and for all. For instance, you could take all your admin-related route definitions and put them in a separate admin PHP file. Then you can simply require this new file directly into your primary web routes file, which, by the way, is an approach Taylor Otwell himself uses in Laravel Breeze. Or you can map it natively via Laravel's core bootstrapping files. It's a fantastic way to cleanly encapsulate different sections of your app. Now, you might be wondering, wait, if I have all these separate files, won't reading them on every user request slow down my app? Well, just remember that once your architecture is perfectly modular, running the optimize command ensures it all executes at blazing fast speeds in production. Laravel basically compiles all those beautifully organized route files into a single cached array. So you get the absolute best of both worlds: ultimate organization for you as the developer and incredible speed for the end user. So, to wrap this all up, by grouping wisely, strictly adhering to standard resource controllers, utilizing invocables for singular actions, and smartly splitting your files, you ensure your codebase remains a total joy to work in. It's like a giant puzzle where all the pieces finally fit perfectly. So ask yourself this: when future developers look at your application, will they see a tangled spaghetti mess or a brilliant, maintainable blueprint? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and happy refactoring.